There is a strange paradox hidden within the human heart. We often assume that when someone truly loves us, they will naturally move closer, become more expressive, and seek every opportunity to remain in our presence. Yet reality frequently reveals something far more complex. The deepest emotions do not always create immediate closeness. Sometimes they awaken forces that have been sleeping beneath the surface for years. A person can look into your eyes and suddenly find themselves confronting memories they thought were long forgotten. They may discover fears they never knew were still alive. Without intending to, your presence becomes a mirror that reflects parts of themselves they have spent a lifetime trying to avoid. Every individual carries invisible emotional scars. Some were formed during childhood, when affection was inconsistent or absent. Others emerged through betrayal, disappointment, abandonment, or relationships that left lasting emotional wounds. Although these experiences may fade from conscious memory, they rarely disappear completely. Instead, they settle into the unconscious, quietly shaping expectations, decisions, and emotional reactions. Most of the time, these hidden wounds remain unnoticed because nothing disturbs them. Life continues on the surface, and the deeper layers remain silent. Then someone extraordinary enters their life. Without realizing it, your kindness, understanding, and emotional presence begin touching places within them that no one else has reached. What they experience is not simply attraction. It feels as though something deep inside has been awakened. Along with feelings of affection comes a flood of vulnerability. They begin imagining what it would mean to lose you, disappoint you, or fail to meet your expectations. Suddenly, the possibility of happiness also carries the possibility of unbearable pain. This emotional awakening creates an inner conflict. One part of them longs to move closer, to share their thoughts, reveal their feelings, and build something meaningful. Another part remembers every painful lesson their past has taught them. That fearful voice whispers that closeness always ends in suffering, that trust eventually becomes betrayal, and that opening the heart is simply inviting future heartbreak. Even if these beliefs are not objectively true, they can feel absolutely real because they were shaped by genuine emotional experiences. The result is behavior that appears confusing from the outside. They hesitate before sending messages. They become quiet after moments of emotional intimacy. They disappear just when the connection seems strongest. Their actions seem inconsistent, but beneath that inconsistency is an invisible psychological struggle. They are not only responding to you. They are responding to every unresolved experience that your presence has unknowingly awakened. Many people interpret this withdrawal as a lack of love, yet the opposite may be closer to the truth. Sometimes love becomes frightening precisely because it is genuine. Casual relationships rarely expose our deepest fears because we have little to lose. But when someone begins to matter profoundly, every emotional defense becomes active. The heart starts calculating every possible disappointment before it even occurs. Rather than embracing the unknown, the mind attempts to protect itself by creating distance. Consider how often people sabotage what they secretly desire most. They convince themselves that they are not ready, that the timing is wrong, or that circumstances make the relationship impossible. While some of these reasons may contain truth, they can also become convenient shelters from the deeper fear of being emotionally exposed. Staying away feels safer than risking complete vulnerability. Distance offers temporary relief, even though it often creates lasting regret. What makes this struggle even more difficult is that the person experiencing it may not fully understand their own behavior. They may genuinely wonder why they keep pulling away from someone who brings them peace. They may feel guilty for becoming distant while simultaneously feeling unable to do anything differently. The conflict exists beneath conscious awareness, where emotions often guide decisions long before logic can explain them. This is why patience alone cannot solve every emotional mystery. Hidden wounds cannot be healed simply because love exists. They must first be acknowledged. The fears buried within the unconscious must gradually become visible before they lose their power. Until that happens, the person may continue standing at the edge of genuine connections, wanting to step forward while feeling held back by invisible chains forged long before the two of you ever met. There are moments when a person's silence is not created by a lack of feeling, but by an overwhelming fear of what those feelings might eventually bring. From the outside, distance appears cold, almost indifferent. Yet beneath that silence, an invisible battle may be unfolding. The heart urges them to move closer, while the mind insists that retreat is the only safe option. This conflict is one of the most misunderstood aspects of human relationships, because people often judge actions without recognizing the psychological forces that produce them. Every human being develops emotional defenses throughout life. These defenses are not signs of weakness, they are survival strategies. They emerge after disappointment, betrayal, rejection, or repeated emotional pain. At first, they serve an important purpose. They prevent further injury and help the person regain a sense of stability. But over time, these protective walls become permanent structures. Instead of guarding against genuine dangers, they begin blocking genuine love. The individual no longer distinguishes between a real threat and the possibility of happiness. Everything emotionally significant begins to feel risky. When someone enters their life and awakens deep affection, those defenses immediately become active. It is almost as if an internal alarm begins sounding. The closer the relationship grows, the louder that alarm becomes. Rather than enjoying the connection, they become increasingly focused on everything that could go wrong. They imagine rejection before it happens. They anticipate loss before anything has been lost. They prepare themselves for abandonment even while they are still being loved. This way of thinking is rarely conscious. They may not wake up one morning and decide to avoid someone they care about. Instead, subtle fears slowly influence their behavior. They hesitate before expressing affection. They delay responding to messages. They avoid emotionally meaningful conversations. Eventually, they begin creating physical or emotional distance, believing that space will protect them from pain they have not yet experienced. Ironically, the more important you become to them, the stronger this protective instinct may grow. If someone means very little, there is almost nothing to lose. But when someone begins to matter deeply, every interaction carries emotional weight. The possibility of making a mistake feels terrifying. The fear of saying the wrong thing becomes overwhelming. Even moments of happiness are accompanied by anxiety, because happiness creates attachment, and attachment introduces the possibility of grief. Many people assume courage means having no fear. In reality, courage exists only where fear is present. Unfortunately, not everyone has developed the emotional strength to face that fear directly. Some respond by convincing themselves that distance is wisdom. They tell themselves that staying away is the responsible choice, that avoiding the relationship will prevent future suffering for both people involved. Although this reasoning appears logical, it is often driven more by fear than by truth. This creates a painful contradiction. The person may think about you constantly while refusing to come closer. They may miss your presence while convincing themselves that separation is necessary. They may replay conversations in their mind, imagine different futures, and silently hope for connection, all while continuing to withdraw. Their behavior seems inconsistent because their inner world is divided. One part seeks intimacy while another seeks protection. The mind has an extraordinary ability to justify avoidance. It can invent countless explanations for remaining distant. It may claim that life is too complicated, that the timing is wrong, or that responsibilities leave no room for love. Sometimes these explanations contain genuine elements, but beneath them often lies a simpler truth: emotional vulnerability feels dangerous. Remaining distant creates the illusion of control. If they never fully open their heart, they believe they cannot be completely broken. Yet this protection comes at a hidden cost. By avoiding possible heartbreak, they also avoid the possibility of profound connection. The walls that keep pain outside also keep love from entering completely. Safety becomes a lonely prison built by the very fears meant to provide comfort. For this reason, Another person's distance should not always be interpreted as rejection. Sometimes it reflects an inner world still governed by old wounds rather than present realities. Their withdrawal says more about the battles they continue to fight within themselves than about the value of the person they are trying so hard not to lose. One of the quietest tragedies of the human heart is that a person can love someone deeply while secretly believing they do not deserve to be loved in return. From the outside, this contradiction makes little sense. If the feelings are genuine, why would they hesitate? Why would they remain distant instead of embracing the opportunity before them? The answer often lies not in the strength of their affection, but in the image they carry of themselves. Love is not experienced only through the eyes of another person. It is also filtered through the beliefs we hold about our own worth. Every individual develops an inner voice over the course of life. This voice is shaped by countless experiences, especially those that occur during our most vulnerable years. Encouragement teaches us that we are capable and worthy. Constant criticism teaches us that we are never enough. Rejection, neglect, humiliation, or repeated failure can slowly create a painful conviction that something within us is fundamentally flawed. Even when life changes, that hidden belief often remains untouched, quietly influencing every relationship that follow when someone with this hidden sense of inadequacy encounters a person they genuinely admire. Their first reaction may not be confidence but fear. They do not simply see someone they care about. They see someone they believe deserves better than themselves. Instead of asking, "Could this relationship make us both happy?" they begin asking, "What happens when they discover who I really am?" Their attention shifts away from the possibility of love and becomes fixed on the possibility of disappointment. The strange thing about self-doubt is that it does not require evidence to survive. A person may be admired by friends, respected by colleagues, and appreciated by family, yet still feel deeply unworthy inside. The human mind often protects old beliefs more fiercely than it accepts new realities. Compliments are dismissed as politeness. Acts of affection are questioned. Genuine interest is met with suspicion. Instead of believing they are loved, they wonder when the other person will finally realize they made a mistake. As these thoughts grow stronger, distance begins to feel like an act of mercy. They convince themselves that staying away is the kinder choice. They believe that if they step back now, they will spare you from future disappointment. In their minds, they are protecting you from the flaws they cannot stop seeing in themselves. What appears to be emotional coldness is often a quiet sacrifice, shaped by insecurity rather than indifference. This creates a painful cycle. The more they value you, the more impossible the relationship seems. Your strengths become reminders of their perceived weaknesses. Your kindness makes them question whether they deserve such understanding. Your belief in them feels difficult to accept because it clashes with the harsh beliefs they have carried for years. Instead of feeling comforted by your affection, they become overwhelmed by the responsibility of living up to it. Many people think that love automatically heals insecurity, but deep emotional wounds rarely disappear simply because someone else offers acceptance. Another person's affection can open the door to healing. Yet the journey still requires an internal transformation. Until they begin questioning the false stories they tell themselves, every expression of love may be met with hesitation. They continue seeing themselves through the lens of old pain rather than present reality. Their silence, therefore, is often directed inward rather than outward. They are arguing with themselves more than they are avoiding you. They replay conversations, searching for mistakes that may not even exist. They examine every interaction, convinced they have said too much or too little. Even moments of genuine happiness become difficult to enjoy because they are overshadowed by the fear that such happiness cannot last. The greatest obstacle is not that they fail to recognize your value. On the contrary, they may see your value with remarkable clarity. The real obstacle is that they cannot yet recognize their own. As long as they believe they are fundamentally inadequate, Every step toward intimacy feels like walking toward inevitable rejection. Until they learn to see themselves with greater honesty and compassion, they may continue standing at a distance, loving deeply while believing that your life would somehow be better without them, even when the truth may be exactly the opposite. Not every battle leaves visible scars. Some of the most exhausting conflicts take place entirely within the human mind, where no one else can witness them. A person may appear calm, distant, or emotionally unavailable on the outside, while internally they are caught between two powerful forces pulling them in opposite directions. One part of them longs for connection, closeness, and the comfort of being truly understood. Another part fears everything that genuine intimacy requires. These opposing desires create a tension that is invisible to others but deeply felt by the person experiencing it. When someone begins to love deeply, they are not only inviting another person into their life, they are also opening the door to parts of themselves they have long kept hidden. Love has a way of exposing what ordinary life allows us to ignore. It reveals insecurities that once remained silent, fears that seemed forgotten, and emotional wounds that were merely waiting for the right moment to return. What looks like a relationship between two people often becomes an encounter with one's own inner world. This is why someone may unexpectedly begin pulling away just as the relationship starts becoming meaningful. The deeper the emotional bond grows, the more intense their internal struggle becomes. They may want to express their feelings openly, yet every attempt is interrupted by doubt. They may imagine a future together, only to be overwhelmed moments later by thoughts of failure, loss, or rejection. Their heart speaks the language of hope, while their fears speak the language of caution. Both voices are equally convincing, leaving them trapped in uncertainty. Many people assume that hesitation means a lack of interest, but inner conflict rarely follows such simple rules. In fact, the strongest emotional struggles often occur precisely because the feelings are genuine. If someone means very little, there is little reason to fear. But when another person becomes emotionally significant, the possibility of losing them suddenly feels unbearable. Every conversation carries greater meaning. Every misunderstanding feels more dangerous. Every silence becomes something to analyze. Love magnifies not only joy but also vulnerability. Inside this conflict, the mind begins creating endless questions. What if I disappoint them? What if they eventually leave? What if I cannot become the person they deserve? These thoughts repeat themselves until they become louder than the quiet certainty of the heart. Instead of experiencing the present moment, the person becomes trapped in imagined futures that have not yet happened. Fear starts making decisions before reality has the chance to speak. At times, this inner battle becomes so exhausting that withdrawal feels like the only escape. Distance provides temporary relief because it reduces the emotional intensity. By stepping away, they no longer have to face the constant uncertainty, the endless self-questioning, or the vulnerability that love demands. Although this decision may appear logical from their perspective, it rarely brings lasting peace. The emotions remain unresolved, and the longing often continues beneath the silence. One of the most difficult aspects of this struggle is that the person themselves may not fully understand why they are behaving this way. They may genuinely wonder why they cannot simply move forward. They know what they feel, yet they cannot seem to act in harmony with those feelings. This disconnect creates frustration, guilt, and confusion. They may blame circumstances, timing, or external problems because the true source of their hesitation remains hidden beneath layers of unconscious fear. Meanwhile, the person on the other side often interprets the distance as rejection. They begin questioning their own worth, unaware that the silence they are experiencing is largely the result of an invisible conflict taking place within someone else's mind. Two people can care deeply for one another while being separated not by a lack of love, but by unresolved psychological struggles that neither fully understands. Real transformation begins only when a person becomes willing to face these inner contradictions instead of running from them. The fears must be acknowledged rather than obeyed. The hidden doubts must be examined instead of accepted as truth. Until that happens, the greatest obstacle is not the relationship itself, but the unseen battle within. It is a battle between the desire to be loved and the fear of what such love might require, and until that conflict is resolved, even the deepest affection may continue to hide behind silence and distance. Many people believe that love alone is enough to create a lasting relationship. They imagine that if two people care deeply for one another, every obstacle will naturally disappear, yet experience often reveals a different truth. Love can bring two hearts together, but it cannot automatically heal emotional wounds, dissolve old fears, or erase years of unconscious habits. Genuine connection requires more than strong feelings. It requires inner transformations, the quiet and often difficult process of becoming someone who can both give and receive love without being ruled by fear. Every person carries an unseen emotional history. It is made up of childhood experiences, painful memories, disappointments, and the countless moments that quietly shaped the way they understand themselves and others. These experiences do not remain locked in the past. They become part of the lens through which every future relationship is viewed. If someone learned that trust leads to betrayal, they may struggle to believe sincere affection. If they grew up feeling ignored or criticized, they may find it difficult to accept kindness without questioning it. Their heart may long for closeness, yet their unconscious continues to expect pain. This is why real love often becomes the beginning of an inner journey rather than its destination. When another person enters their life and offers genuine acceptance, hidden parts of the self begin to emerge. Old insecurities that once remained silent suddenly demand attention. Long forgotten fears become impossible to ignore. Instead of seeing this as a sign that something is wrong with the relationship, it can be understood as evidence that the relationship has reached places within the soul that ordinary experiences never touched. Growth begins the moment a person stops blaming every uncomfortable feeling on external circumstances and starts looking inward. This is not an easy task. It requires the courage to admit that some of the greatest obstacles exist within the mind itself. It means recognizing patterns that have repeated throughout life instead of assuming that every failed connection was simply the fault of someone else. Such honesty is uncomfortable because it asks a person to face truths they have spent years avoiding. For someone who truly loves you, this period of transformation can feel confusing. They may realize that they cannot continue living according to old fears if they want the relationship to survive. They begin noticing how quickly they withdraw when intimacy grows stronger. They become aware of how often they expect rejection before it occurs. They may finally understand that the walls protecting them from pain are also preventing them from experiencing genuine closeness. Yet awareness alone is not enough. Transformation requires patience, self-reflection, and repeated acts of courage. A person must gradually challenge the beliefs that have governed their emotional life for years. They must learn that vulnerability is not always weakness, that trust does not always lead to betrayal, and that love is not something earned through perfection, but shared through authenticity. These lessons cannot be learned overnight. They unfold slowly, often through moments of failure, reflection, and renewed effort. This explains why someone may choose temporary distance even while their feelings remain strong. They recognize that entering a relationship without confronting their own emotional struggles could unintentionally cause harm. Their fears might lead them to become controlling, emotionally unavailable, overly dependent, or constantly suspicious. Instead of allowing those patterns to damage someone they deeply care about, they may decide to step back until they better understand themselves. Although this decision can be painful for both peoples, it sometimes reflects a sincere desire to prevent greater suffering in the future. The most meaningful relationships are rarely built between two flawless individuals. They are built between two people who are willing to acknowledge their imperfections without allowing those imperfections to define them. Love reaches its deepest form when it inspires personal growth rather than emotional dependence. It encourages each person to become more honest, more self-aware, and more capable of meeting another human being without hiding behind fear or illusion. If someone truly loves you, their greatest challenge may not be finding the courage to love you. It may be finding the courage to face themselves. Only when they begin healing the parts of their inner world that have long been governed by insecurity and fear can they fully step into the relationship they have quietly desired all along. In that sense, the distance is not always a sign that love is fading. Sometimes it is the space where profound inner transformation is slowly taking place. One of the greatest mistakes people make when someone pulls away is believing that the distance must be a reflection of their own value. The mind immediately begins searching for personal flaws. It asks painful questions that seem impossible to silence. Was I not enough? Did I do something wrong? If I had been more attractive, more successful, more understanding, would they have stayed? These questions feel natural because the human heart often tries to make sense of loss by turning inward. Yet this habit can become one of the most destructive illusions we ever believe. When another person's behavior changes, we instinctively assume that we are the cause. We forget that every individual carries an entire inner world that existed long before we entered their life. They have fears, memories, disappointments, and unresolved conflicts that continue shaping their decisions every day. Their silence is influenced by experiences we may never fully understand. Their hesitation often has roots that reach far deeper than the present relationship. What appears to be a response to us may actually be a continuation of struggles they have carried for years. Human beings rarely see others as they truly are. Instead, we interpret people through the lens of our own emotional history. Someone who has learned to fear abandonment may see rejection even where none exists. Someone who believes they are unworthy may assume that every relationship will eventually end. These expectations quietly shape behavior, often without conscious awareness. As a result, a person may withdraw not because the relationship lacks value, but because they cannot escape the fears that already exist within themselves. This is why another person's inability to come closer should never become the measure of your own worth. Their choices reflect the condition of their inner life far more than they reflect your value as a human being. A person struggling with insecurity may distance themselves from someone who treats them with kindness. A person haunted by betrayal may question even the most sincere expressions of love. A person overwhelmed by emotional conflict may walk away from the very connection they have always desired. None of these actions prove that the other person is unlovable. They simply reveal that unresolved inner struggles are directing present behavior. Unfortunately, when people internalize another person's distance, they begin abandoning themselves in an attempt to regain affection. They change their personality, silence their opinions, ignore their needs, and sacrifice their dignity, hoping that enough effort will finally earn the closeness they seek. At first, these sacrifices appear small. They become more available, more accommodating, more willing to overlook unhealthy patterns. Gradually, however, they lose touch with the person they once were. Their entire sense of identity becomes dependent on receiving validation from someone else. This is one of the greatest dangers in any relationship. When your worth depends upon another person's approvals, you surrender your inner stability to circumstances beyond your control. Every delayed message feels like rejection. Every moment of silence becomes proof that you are somehow inadequate. Your emotional life rises and falls according to someone else's actions. Instead of living from your own center, you become trapped in constant uncertainty. Real confidence grows from a different foundation. It comes from recognizing that your value exists independently of another person's ability to recognize it. Someone else's confusion cannot erase your kindness. Their fear cannot diminish your character. Their emotional limitations cannot reduce your potential. The opinions and decisions of others may affect your circumstances, but they do not determine your identity. This understanding creates a profound sense of freedom. Instead of chasing someone who continues to withdraw, you begin focusing on your own growth. You continue developing your strengths, nurturing meaningful friendships, pursuing your purpose, and building a life filled with substance. Love is no longer something you beg for. It becomes something you are capable of sharing without losing yourself in the process. Ironically, people who know their own worth often create healthier relationships because they are no longer driven by desperation. They do not confuse sacrifice with love or emotional dependence with intimacy. They understand that genuine connection requires mutual effort, honesty, and emotional responsibility. If another person chooses distance because of battles they have not yet faced, that decision belongs to them. You may offer compassion, patience, and understanding, but you must never exchange your self-respect for the hope that someone else will finally discover your values. The deepest form of love begins with the relationship you build with yourself. When that foundation is strong, another person's absence no longer has the power to define who you are. Their journey remains their own, while your path continues forward with dignity, clarity, and the quiet confidence that your worth has never depended on anyone else's ability to see it. The future of any meaningful relationship is determined by more than emotion alone. Feelings can bring two people together, but they cannot carry them through every challenge that life presents. Affection may ignite the connection, yet something deeper decides whether that connection survives the passing of time. The true question is not whether love exists. The true question is whether both individuals are willing to grow beyond the fears, habits, and limitations that keep them apart. Genuine love is not measured only by the intensity of emotion in a single moment. It is measured by the courage to transform for the sake of something greater than personal comfort. Many people spend years waiting for another person to return, believing that strong feelings will eventually overcome every obstacle. They hold on to memories, replay old conversations, and convince themselves that if the love was real, everything will somehow work itself out. But love is not a force that removes responsibility. It does not magically dissolve insecurity, heal emotional wounds, or erase destructive patterns. Without personal growth, even the deepest affection can slowly become trapped beneath fear, misunderstanding, and silence. Imagine two people standing on opposite sides of a river. They can see each other clearly. They may even long to be together with all their hearts. But unless someone is willing to build a bridge, the distance remains. Feelings alone cannot create that bridge. It is built through honesty, emotional maturity, self-awareness, and the willingness to confront what has been avoided for years. Every step toward healing becomes another piece of that bridge. Every act of courage strengthens the possibility of reunion. If someone truly loves you, they will eventually face a choice that no one else can make for them. They can continue allowing fear to guide their decisions, or they can begin questioning the beliefs that have controlled their life. They can remain imprisoned by old disappointments, or they can slowly learn that the future does not have to repeat the past. This decision cannot be forced by another person. No amount of persuasion, sacrifice, or waiting can complete this work on their behalf. Inner transformation is always a personal responsibility. This realization can be painful because it removes the illusion that you have complete control over the outcomes. We often believe that if we love someone enough, support them enough, or remain patient long enough, they will eventually overcome their struggles. While compassion is valuable, growth cannot be borrowed from another human being. Every individual must decide whether they are willing to face themselves honestly. Until that moment arrives, even sincere love may remain trapped beneath hesitation and emotional distance. For this reason, your own life should never be placed on hold while waiting for another person to find their path. Love should inspire growth, not endless suspension. Continue becoming the person you are meant to become. Invest in your own wisdom, your own emotional strength, and your own sense of purpose. Build a life that reflects your values rather than your fears. The healthiest relationships are formed when two complete individuals choose each other freely, not when one person abandons their own journey in hopes of rescuing another. There is a quiet confidence that emerges when you understand this truth. You stop trying to force outcomes that belong to someone else's choices. Instead, you focus on the only life you can truly shape, your own. This shift does not mean you stop caring. It means your care is no longer mixed with desperation. You allow others the freedom to grow at their own pace while protecting your own peace of mind. You recognize that love cannot flourish where freedom is absent. Sometimes, the person who stayed away eventually finds the courage to return. Through reflection, experience, and personal growth, they begin seeing the fears that once controlled them. They discover that the walls they built for protection also kept them isolated. With greater self-awareness comes a different way of relating to the world, and they may finally become capable of offering the openness they once lacked. If that happens, the relationship has the opportunity to begin on stronger foundations than before. Other times, the journey leads in different directions. The person never confronts the patterns that continue shaping their life, and the distance remains. While this outcome can be heartbreaking, it does not diminish the value of the love that once existed. Some relationships enter our lives not only to bring companionship, but also to awaken growth within us. They teach us resilience, deepen our understanding of ourselves, and remind us that real love is never about losing who we are to keep someone else close. In the end, genuine love is revealed not merely by longing, promises, or beautiful words, but by the willingness to grow beyond fear. When two people choose courage over avoidance, honesty over illusion, and personal transformation over emotional comfort, love gains the strength to endure. Whether that journey brings them back together or leads them toward different futures, the growth they achieve becomes the most meaningful expression of love they could ever offer to another person and to themselves.